Make sure the O4 Using Compression project is open if you're following along. Adjusting audio levels for video will only get you so far. For professional results, the overall dynamics of the audio need to be tamed. In the space of a second, an on-screen talent's dialogue can go from a whisper to a shout, from soft to dynamic. If you turn down the sound to make room for the shout, the whisper will be lost in the background. If you turn up the volume to make the whisper audible, the shout will be distorted, making the sound unusable. The solution is to use a dynamics effect. The most common dynamics effect is the compressor. A compressor does exactly what its name implies. It compresses the volume of the audio, but it does it selectively. Here's a sample voiceover with wildly varying dynamics. From soft to dynamic. Now take a listen with compression applied. From soft to dynamic. A compressor reduces loud sounds while leaving quiet sounds untouched. The result is that the overall difference between loud and soft sounds is reduced, enabling an audience to hear everything without straining or being blown away by sudden outbursts. Okay, so let's work on evening out the dynamics in the hot clip.
Two guys coming over, that's right. I totally
A quick note,
forgot.
with
Hey,
these
I'm
clips,
Tracy.
compression has already been applied during filming, but we'll work with the clip just to examine the overall effect. Select the clip, and from the effect browser, double-click a compressor from the Levels category. In the Audio Inspector, click the compressor's icon to open its HUD. There are four main controls to a compressor: threshold, ratio, attack, and release. It's usually a good idea to set these to a rest position before you start adjusting. For threshold, adjust its slider to the maximum position. For ratio, the rest position, the position where it has no effect on the signal, is a ratio of 1:1. For release, you can set it to around 60 milliseconds to begin with. Leave attack set to 0. One more thing, make sure gain is set to 0 and auto gain is off. We'll look at gain later, but it's easier to understand how a compressor works by starting with the gain set to 0. First, we'll adjust the ratio. The ratio determines how much the loud sounds are compressed. Right now, it's set to 1:1, so there's no compression. Set to 2:1, the compressor would cut the volume that exceeds the threshold by a half. Set at 6:1, the audio will be compressed to 1/6 of the original excess volume. For dialogue, you're usually looking for a level of around 6:1 to 8:1. The threshold determines how loud a sound needs to get before it's compressed. Here, we'll use the / key to play through the clip and watch the audio levels.
Two guys coming over.
As we drag the threshold down, we get visual feedback of when and by how much the audio signal triggers the compressor. We'll adjust until we're happy that the loudest sounds are triggering the compressor, but not the quieter ones. One of the really nice features of Final Cut Pro X is the ability to see the effect of your changes instantly on the clip's waveform view. Notice as you adjust the threshold, you can visually see the extreme peaks of the waveform being compressed, while the rest of the signal remains unchanged. Be careful not to overdo compression. Heavily compressed dialogue can suck the life out of a performance and actually create listener fatigue. In fact, the unfortunate reality for this clip is that we're stuck with hardware compression that was applied during filming. Listening back, you can hear that the dynamics of the dialogue sound much more even.
Two guys coming over, that's right. I totally forgot. Hey, I'm Tracy.
Let's turn to the release control. Release determines how long the audio will continue to be compressed after the compressor has been triggered. Set this to quick, and you'll hear heavy breathing, often called pumping, right after the compressed sound.
Two guys coming over, that's right. I totally forgot. Hey, I'm Tracy.
Set it too long, and you'll end up reducing the volume of quiet sections of dialogue that should be left untouched.
Two guys coming over, that's right. I totally forgot.
Again, adjust the release time until it works for the current clip.
Hey, I'm
For
Tracy.
dialogue, you'll find 60 to 100 milliseconds is usually sufficient. Finally, Attack determines how quickly the compression kicks in. For dialogue, you'll want to keep this fairly low, 10 milliseconds or less. You may find that really short attack times reduce some of the crispness of dialogue by preventing certain consonant sounds from building properly. If the talent was too close to the microphone, you may be getting a lot of plosive sounds. Tight attack times can help to tame that particular issue. Once your compressor has been set, you can use the gain control to bring the overall level of the audio back up. Since you've quietened the loud sounds by compressing them, you'll probably want to boost everything back to an acceptable level.
Two guys coming over, that's right, I totally forgot. Hey, I'm Tracy.
Auto gain attempts to automatically set the gain to compensate for the reduction in level.
Two guys coming over, that's right.
Like many automatic fixes,
Hey, I'm Tracy.
it rarely works well. Instead, leave it off and adjust the gain slider up until you're happy with the levels. Now before we wrap, let's talk about setting levels in general. Now that you have a compression and EQ applied to clips, you can adjust the general level of your audio across the timeline. Common rule of thumb is to set your foreground dialogue levels so that they average at around -20 in the meters. This keeps the peaks safely away from the zero clipping point, but helps them to stand out from background sounds like Foley and music. Those background sounds can be set at around -30. That should nicely balance the mix, giving the dialogue plenty of room to stand out from the music and Foley.